Hi! So last night I finally checked out the Amelie musical. So unfortunately I wasn't able to see Amelie when it was still on Broadway. The reason behind that is I believe I was curious about it and I wanted to see what it was like because I really liked the movie. I wanted to know what the musical was like, but I think around that time I knew it wasn't really doing that well, and I sort of had a choice to make in between seeing Amelie or seeing Bandstand, which also was not really doing so hot. And I chose to see Bandstand instead for a couple of reasons. First of all, Amelie, I did know the storyline in general, at least, whereas Bandstand was a complete mystery, so I was really curious about that. The Newsies Live film had only just recently been released for digital download purchase, so the Newsies fandom was very big at the moment, which meant I was seeing a lot of the Corey Cott Bandstand related stuff around. I did also, I think I had some worries about Amelie. I wasn't sure what it would be like. The idea of seeing a musical adaptation of Amelie seemed kind of odd to think about. I mean, the movie is so silent. She's very silent in the movie, right? And so the idea of her singing all of her thoughts and feelings all over the place, like even if they would be soliloquies and she wouldn't actually be saying them to another person, it's sort of like, even though in the movie we have the narrator telling us things about her and what she's feeling, it was always very distant feeling, whereas musicals, by its very nature, the songs are very much about, you know, sort of drawing you in, bringing you into the characters' emotions and motivations, and in the movie Amelie, it's more like you sort of just observe what she does a lot of the time, and so it's just a very different sort of feel. I wasn't sure what it would be like. I was curious, but I wasn't, you know, I was a little apprehensive. I know there are some other concerns, like my friend, I know, for example, was also worried about the idea of it because she wasn't sure if they would lean too much on how weird she was. Like, she's a little worried they would turn her into some sort of manic pixie dream girl. And she had various evidence, like this whole thing within all the promo images had Philippa with the raspberries on her fingers, eating the raspberries off her fingers, and she was like, that's something she only did when she was a kid. Like, if they might be making her too whimsical as an adult more than she is because she's quirky, but she's not completely out there. But those were all concerns that we had going in. I was curious, but I wasn't entirely 100% certain, and when push came to shove, I ended up choosing to go see Bandstand and see what that was. I thought to myself, oh, I can still see Amelie later, but then it closed, so. Now, normally, I would like to actually see a show before I talk about it or anything, because I know that when you don't see something, you're sort of working off of limited information, and you could just get certain facts wrong, have altered viewpoint on things, like just interpret things a different way. I know, for example, before I saw Dear Evan Hansen, I had only listened to the soundtrack and I knew the general plotline and everything, but I definitely, when I saw it, it changed my entire perspective on a lot of things with characters' personalities and the way they act. So it's, I know it's not really it's not a perfect situation to not have seen Amelie for real, but I mean, it's off Broadway now, so what can you do? Like, if it ever goes on tour, I'll definitely try to see it, but for now I'm working off of what I have, which is the bootleg recording of one of the preview shows, which is on YouTube, which I saw, and also the soundtrack, which I listened to. So the thing about the bootleg that exists right now, it is of one of the preview shows, so things definitely changed from there to the final version, which I could tell when I listened to the soundtrack, and I realized some of the songs were different. So I'm not 100% sure on how the finished product actually turned out, but I'm gonna talk about what I did see. So like I said, last night I watched the bootleg, and then I listened to the cast album afterwards. I definitely noticed the differences in some of the stuff I say here in this video might be sort of inaccurate because I'm working off this limited knowledge that I got. But here we go. So something I noticed immediately when I was listening to the album after seeing the previews, bootleg performance recording, was just that in the previews bootleg, the first number was very like, it was calling back to that moment in the very beginning of the movie when they're saying, at this moment in time, a fly lands on a tablecloth, a guy loses his newspaper, like Amelie is born, you know. And it was just a very cute song they had. It was like, September 3rd, 1975, and they were talking about all the different things that affecting all the little characters. And what they did actually, what I realized when I was listening to the album, was they actually cut that number. By the time they finalized the show, they had cut that number, and instead they expanded the second number, which was introducing her parents and her childhood life and such, to be the new first number. And they expanded that. They added in a whole bunch of lyrics about, also harkening back to the movie, where they were saying, he likes this, he doesn't like this, she likes this, she doesn't like this, which is great that they put that in, because that's also a much beloved thing from the movie. Or it was missing from the previews version. So it was really cool to see that, but I was like, oh, they took out that first number, because that was sort of a more major theme, it seemed like, in the previews version, because it was very much about sort of like all these things, all these people are connected, even though they may not know why or not see how, kind of deal. And it was a very romantic sort of theme, like all this stuff brought you to me. It was mentioned again throughout the show a couple times, like, for example, Nino has this whole song about collecting the photo booth photos, which it was adorable, by the way, that number. It's really showcased how he and Amelie are like this really, they're very similar sort of people. They're both kind of look at other people and feel connected to their lives from a distance. They're like doing things, like she always is looking at people from behind the glass of the menu board in the cafe, or from her little telescope glass, or through her bedroom window, her apartment window. And Nino is like looking at these photos of people and getting the sense of their stories from these like important moments in their lives that involved them taking the photos, and then whatever other important moments in their lives that might have led to them eventually discarding the photos. And he gets them, and he has the same sort of line ending that, like, this all brought you to me, you being both the various people that he was looking at, and also in a grander sense, probably Amelie, in terms of the overarching plotline. And then they even brought it up, like that was the finale number, was the same kind of thing with the date and all these things and everyone being connected, and it brought them together. And they also referenced both that first song with Amelie and the photo booth thing again, where they're saying, here we are, we're taking the photos, and it was about like living in these moments captured in the photo booth together and everything like that. But all that got cut, right? According to the cast album anyway, it seems like all that got cut. You know, just changed them, had them cut out, things like that. The opening number I already mentioned was more about her childhood and her parents, and they had all that he likes this, she likes that, etc. So the finale number sort of then became this whole song about like being really unsure, and it was sort of continuing a different theme we had going throughout the whole show, which was about this whole being too scared to get close to people, to be intimate with other people, because like what happens when it's actually real instead of just watching from behind a glass or waving through a window. It was like, I don't know what's going to happen now, and I'm scared, but here we go, like we'll try it together. So that's also really nice. It's really nice. The first time I listened to the album after having just seen the show, I was like, wait, what? All right, so things about the adaptation versus the movie. Now, I think the main thing that you have to do with adaptations, right, is just you have to accept going in that there are going to be different. It's a different piece. Like, I find that it always sort of lends me to enjoy things a lot more when I can look at movies or shows or whatever as their own thing and judge them accordingly instead of trying to like hold them side by side against the original. I mean, there have been so many times where I've had the discussion with people where they're complaining about some adaptation because like, oh, why did Hagrid come right out and say, "You're a wizard, Harry," when in the book there was so much more build up. I really liked that instead of him just coming out and saying it. Or like, oh gosh, why do the Flash and Supergirl have to be from different Earths? I don't understand why Supergirl and Flash couldn't have been on the same Earth and just have Superman already established as a superhero when the Flash started, because that's how it always was in the comics, and I really wish it was just like the comics. It's just like, it's just different. It's just let it go. Like, it's its own thing. And you know, it's like when you start expecting them to be exactly the same, you're only gonna be disappointed when they aren't. And it's like, why cause distress to yourself like that? Like, embrace the differences. So even if an adaptation made a change that you weren't crazy about, like, don't throw the whole thing away, right? Like, judge it on its own merit. And you know, maybe that change they made fit better with the different sort of theme they were emphasizing more in this version. Like, you know, there's reasons that people do things when they make adaptations. There's reasons for the changes they make. Anyway, so the musical adaptation of Amelie obviously is going to be different than the movie. So the movie, of course, is just, it's this beloved, iconic movie. It's like we knew going in, right, that a lot of fans of the movie were probably going to be very wary of the musical because it's basically impossible for anything to really capture that same offbeat quirkiness the movie had. Like, it was, I mean, in the movie, it was amazing. Every single frame was storyboarded. Like, that's how I first heard about it some years back. Was my graphic design professor was talking about storyboarding, and he used Amelie as an example of just like perfection of artistry in film. It's like, there's literally no way for a stage play to capture the same effect of perfectly positioned camera angles, because it's just by definition what it is. It's, you don't have camera angles on a stage play. It's like, so they had to make it their own unique production. Without that, they had to do other things, theater related things like backdrops and lighting and costumes and staging. Anyway, I'm getting off track. I was going to talk about the differences between the movie and the musical. So, like I said, the musical really, you know, it's not necessarily going to be as quirky as the movie is, largely because it's impossible to do that just by virtue of the medium. So I will say something like, instead of trying to like force a lean into the real quirkiness and risk coming out to Manic Pixie Dream Girl, what they did, I thought, was they made it a little more cute. They did some cutting and changing of scenes and combining of characters, as, you know, it's typical in a stage adaptation of something. Instead of having a million roles, they combine things like, for example, Amelie's widowed neighbor, who had the husband who went off and died in the Alps after leaving her for some other woman or something. They sort of combined that character with her fellow waitress at the cafe, Gina, where the one with the jealous ex, who was always talking to the tape recorder, right? They made it that she used to love this guy who went off and died in the Alps, and then she had a rebound with the jealous guy, and then that's how it'll happen. Like, they just combine it, which is fine. Like, I completely am okay with this. That's all fine. They did also cut the entire part where she played all the really cruel pranks on that vegetable stand owner who was, like, being mean to Lucien. Like, they kept in her encouraging Lucien by making, you know, kind of like this dumb little fig date pun. But, like, they took out that more sort of vindictive side of her thing. And they also, I felt, downplayed some of the more negative aspects of her pranks, besides just that big one. Like, how she sets up Georgette with the jealous ex, I think, what's his name, Joseph? And then he ends up just driving Georgette crazy too with his crazy, weird, stalky jealousy. That was in the movie, and it was in the musical, but I felt like it wasn't as emphasized as it was in the movie. It wasn't as much of a big sort of bad thing. So I was like, like, are you making her a little... They're kind of cutting out some of her worst parts, and in trade for that, what they did was they sort of upped the negative aspect of her fear of getting too close to people, her wanting to always be at a distance. They kind of made more of the central issue, which obviously that was also a major plot line in the movie. But like I said, just like the negative parts of her meddling were kind of played down, this part of her personality with getting too close to people was sort of played up a little bit. Like, not to the point where it was super extreme, but just that sort of became the new version of her flaws. And again, in the nature of musicals, songs, they really bring you into the character, and just the moment that she starts singing anything about that, it's gonna be really sort of emphasized to the audience, like, oh, it's a big deal. You know, where every single time that she is about to meet Nino and she tells herself, stay where you are, and talk to him, and then she ends up running away. Like, it just seems a little bigger than it does in the movie somehow. And they did do things where they added in, like, his side of it being a little more, like, stop running away from me, than they had in the movie. Like, it was in the movie too, but again, it just at a slightly higher level. They did add in a little conversation where he says to her that he understands why she keeps running away, because he feels the same way too. Like, but he does want to try to actually meet. I thought that was really nice that they added that, because it was just like a nice little addition of them connecting and being very similar in this way. And they also added the part where he comes back to the cafe after she was supposed to meet him and runs away, to get her information for her coworkers. Like, in the movie, we only follow Amelie after she runs away, right? Until the part where he shows up at her apartment and he says, oh yeah, you know, Gina gave me your address. But in the musical, they actually showed us the scene with Nino where he comes back, and he left because he was disheartened and he was hurt by her always running away from him. He was almost ready to give up, but he came back to try again, and they had this whole like fun little number where the other cafe girls were interrogating him as to his intentions and everything, which I thought was really nice because it was showing like they all really care about Amelie and wanted to help her out in her life the same way that she was already helping them with all of her little do good deeds. So I thought that was all like really a nice thing. But yeah, anyway, so Amelie musical, I thought it was super cute. It wasn't too heavy on the romance. It didn't like erase that the story is really, it's more about Amelie's growth as a character. So that is something I was kind of worried about going in, that they were gonna really make it too much of the romance story. But they didn't do that, so I was really glad they didn't let the romance overwhelm the story. It didn't lead too heavily on her weirdness and make it seem really clunky or forced how weird she was. It was just, her personality was just there, just like it is in the movie, so it wasn't too overemphasized, which was also a concern that I think a lot of people had going in. So that was really great to see that they didn't, go too far on that either. I thought it was really cute and fun and touching. I swear, I was like actually crying when Bertoldo opened up his tin box of treasures and was like going through all his memories. I was like, oh my god, I'm having a total Ratatouille moment. Like, it brings you right back to that moment in childhood. Anyway, it was great. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend it if you enjoy musical theater genre and you're not a person who gets too hung up on adaptations feeling exactly like their source material, because like I said, it does have a different feeling, but it's very cute in its own right. So I'd say check it out. It's worth a listen. All right, until next time, bye.